From now on, you will take care of my mom and sister with me. If you don't like it, let's break up, Phil suddenly declared. Why do I have to leave the house? I couldn't agree with Phil's sudden proposal. My sister-in-law, Julia, is a real troublemaker. Living with her would be unbearable for me. I tried to prevent this move and plan, but Phil wouldn't listen, and eventually, he threatened me with divorce. But I wasn't prepared to give up so easily. I intended to find his weakness and turn the situation around. If he thought he could keep his secrets from me, he was gravely mistaken. I am Mandy Reynolds, a working housewife in her second year of marriage, age 38. We currently don't have children, but I wish we had. After graduating from vocational school, I worked full-time at a general hospital but reduced my hours for fertility treatments. Now, I work only in the mornings at a local clinic, worrying about fertility treatments and my husband, Phil, in my personal life. I was attracted to Phil's skills and character as an insurance salesman, which eventually led to us getting married. We both shared a strong desire to have children soon. It would be wonderful to have a house filled with children's laughter. I've always wanted children, but I had to consider my age. Why are you so down? It will eventually be possible. Phil seemed to think children would come without effort, but it wasn't that simple. After 2 years, there was still no sign of pregnancy. I tried discussing fertility treatments with Phil, but his response was unexpected. Do we really need to go to the hospital? Celebrities over 40 give birth normally. Why not leave it to nature? I want to do everything possible. You said you wanted children too, right? It's not like we're sick, right? And it costs money, doesn't it? We'll be able to find out whether it's due to an illness or not. If you're worried about the money, I'll pay for it, okay? Is that all right? Phil wasn't fully convinced, but reluctantly agreed to my proposal to pay for the medical expenses myself. Thankfully, I received some support from my parents, which was a relief. However, the situation was tougher than expected, and attending regular appointments while working full-time was challenging. The doctor says I need to come in every 3 days. It's a bit tough with work, but you've been doing great, and you can afford the consultation fees with your income and help from your parents, right? It should be fine. Phil seemed okay as long as it wasn't a financial burden on him, but I was somewhat dissatisfied with his attitude. However, I believed that everything would change for the better once we had a child and encouraged myself. On a weekday when Phil was at work and I was off from my part-time job, I had some rare alone time. I suddenly received a call from an unknown number. It was from Julia, my sister-in-law. I was curious about why she changed her number. Did you change your number? I was surprised to get a call from an unknown number. A lot has happened. By the way, can I stop by? Is Phil at work? Phil isn't here today as it's a weekday, but I'm off. What time will you arrive? However, Julia started talking without paying attention to my question. Mandy, I have a lot to talk about. Let's have a thorough girls' talk. I only asked her about her arrival time, but I didn't get a specific answer. In the end, Julia arrived just as I had finished a few bites of my lunch. So, I hurriedly put away the rest of the lunch in the fridge, muttering to myself, "Welcome. If you had told me your arrival time, I would have prepared lunch for you. I haven't had lunch yet. I'm starving. Is that so? Shall I make something for you?" At that moment, Julia glanced at the kitchen shelf and waved her hand. What she was looking at was a pound cake from a department store, a gift we had received. A limited edition item that I was looking forward to keeping as a special reward for a special day. I don't want to eat a lot because I'll gain weight, but this cake is tempting. Let's just have this for lunch. Where is the knife? While searching the room for a cake knife, I felt a bit uncomfortable with Julia's insistence. I'll cut it. It's okay. It's cluttered with stuff, and I don't want you to look around too much. Don't worry about it. It's not like things will disappear. I'll cut a piece for you too. When Julia took the knife and started dividing the pound cake, I no longer had the energy to object. Julia placed a thick slice of cake in front of herself and a slice so thin it was almost transparent in front of me, then immediately started talking. Listen, recently my boyfriend has been a bit cold. Even when I say I want to meet him, he makes excuses about work or his daughter. Is that so? He has a daughter? I'm a woman too. Isn't it natural to feel lonely? It's only natural to want attention, right? Interrupting the conversation or getting into too much detail can lead to lingering issues, making it incredibly bothersome. In such cases, it's best to keep nodding with a bright smile. This is a social technique I learned through my job as a medical administrator, but I just couldn't turn a deaf ear to Julia's words. He promised he'd get a divorce from his current spouse if we had a child together. Oh, is that so? I felt something was off recently, so I went to the doctor and found out I'm pregnant. I'm so happy just thinking about when to tell him. When's the right moment, I wonder? I almost dropped her mug of coffee. You're pregnant. Wait, but he's married and has a child, and now you're pregnant? He doesn't find his daughter, who resembles his wife, appealing. He wants to live with me and a lovely child who will resemble me. I can't believe this. Then Julia puffed up her face and continued, I need to have a discussion with his current wife, and to do that it's important that I'm a kind woman with a generous heart, right? I was momentarily at a loss for words at Julia's reckless behavior and comments that could hurt a family. Please, just go home. Why? It's getting dark outside and he'll be coming to pick me up. Oh, I'm interested in that department store coffee in the cabinet. Please go. I just want some quiet time. Coming in like some kind of storm, and hearing about her affair and pregnancy was overwhelming. Why is my sister-in-law, who casually engages in affairs, blessed with a child, while I, who longs for one, visits hospitals and takes medication for it isn't? I didn't want to think that someone in my family could act so callously. Confusion clouded my mind, unable to grasp the situation. About a week after Julia's sudden visit and shocking revelation, Phil came home unusually early from work. Oh, home on time today? It's rare since you often come back late. As I spoke, Phil roughly set down his bag and approached me. I heard from Julia. You said some terrible things to her? What terrible things? She did come over, but I didn't say anything terrible. While responding, I realized he might be referring to the affair and pregnancy, but it was too late. Julia called me crying the night before last. As her brother, I can't just watch her cry. But isn't it unreasonable to say nothing when someone is engaging in morally wrong actions? What are you saying? Are you saying my sister did something immoral? Say it clearly. Affairs and pregnancies were delicate issues, not something easily discussed with a husband, and such matters should be conveyed by the parties involved. One should not intervene rashly. Phil continued his one-sided accusations while I remained silent. Probably just hormonal and taking it out on others, right? You always get emotional so quickly. I wanted to retort, who is being emotional here? But in this situation, Phil wouldn't listen to anything. Caught up in playing the heroic role of protecting his troubled sister, I feel sorry for Julia. Make sure you apologize to her. I couldn't fathom why I should apologize. However, not wanting to exacerbate the issue, I reluctantly apologized. I did apologize later, but the mood was sour and we couldn't have a proper conversation. The next day, as if nothing had happened, phone calls and messages started coming in again. The frequency of her messaging increased, becoming somewhat burdensome. It was difficult to reply during work, but ignoring her would result in complaints to Phil, adding to the hassle. Reluctantly, I responded briefly and engaged in the conversation, but I wanted to avoid her bragging about affairs regardless of the time of day or night. Despite trying to discuss Julia's matters with Phil several times, it was to no avail. You are essentially a housewife now, so you should be able to handle conversations with Julia. Or are you maybe jealous that she got pregnant first? Not at all. I'm busy too. Receiving messages that require immediate responses at night leads to sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation? Julia is happy she can talk to you. She didn't expect to find someone so easy to talk to. Just listen to her for a bit. It seemed impossible to get Phil to understand. Despite my worries, the continuous messages from Julia remained a nuisance. However, I would later realize how naive I was to express my frustrations through phone calls and emails. About 2 months after I brought up Julia's matters to Phil, as the seasons changed and I considered switching to autumn clothes, the doorbell rang. Had I ordered something? As I headed to the entrance, an unexpected sight greeted me. Boxes piled up as if they were part of a move were being brought into the house. They were addressed to Phil, likely work-related items. But since their arrival, there had been no contact from Phil, and he hadn't returned home. Would have been nice to have prior notice. 3 days after not hearing a single word from Phil, he returned late at night, as if nothing had happened. "Hey, I'm back. No welcome? I'm trying to sleep. It's 1 a.m. Can you keep it down? Oh, you don't like that I'm back?" He was clearly aggressive, likely due to the alcohol. Approaching me, he stumbled over the large boxes and fell heavily. "Hey, what's with these boxes? You should have sorted them out. These are all addressed to you. I can't just open them without your permission. Are you talking back to me? Anyways, you should take care of these." I was stunned by Phil's statement. "What do you mean? I should handle them?" Just as I said, these belong to Julia and my mom. Mostly Julia's stuff, though. Wait, why are Julia's and your mother's belongings being sent here? Phil began to explain cheerfully, as if a long-awaited plan was coming to fruition. "It's all for my dear sister. She's currently renting and her lease is up for renewal. With talks of moving in with her boyfriend or getting married soon, I need to take care of her a bit. I wasn't aware of such plans. I'm about to be promoted to assistant manager, so my salary will increase. It's all good." Having had little contact with Phil's family since our marriage 2 years ago, this new development was bewildering. "You said you weren't getting along with your parents and were estranged, right?" "Yeah, family felt bothersome for a while. But now, with the promotion and pay raise, it's the perfect opportunity to give back to my parents and sister. Are you really okay with suddenly living together? We'll manage. Besides, there's a spare room. If we convert your room into storage space, there should be plenty of room for 4 people to live comfortably. Don't see a problem, do you?" His attitude assumed everything would go smoothly, but I was far from convinced. Moreover, Phil's offer to support Julia before her marriage made me wonder how much he understood our conversations. The information I received was quite different, leaving me anxious. "From now on, you will take care of my mom and sister with me. If you don't like it, let's break up," Phil suddenly declared. It's difficult to respond to such a sudden request. Even if it's for a short period, I prefer to avoid living together. Then we have no choice but to get a divorce, and I'll leave. Then go ahead and try? But I couldn't just leave immediately. I needed to prepare as much as possible in this house first. I needed to see Phil struggling. So I started by organizing Phil's belongings. I've always doubted his sincerity. Sometimes he came home late at night smelling of woman's perfume, and suspicious cards were frequently found in his pockets. He seemed like a fool if he believed I hadn't noticed with such clear evidence. When I checked the computer we share, I found that Phil had left his account logged in. I was able to go through his emails, and eventually, I was able to confirm his affair. Sugary sweet messages were lined up. The sender was a woman's name. Further investigation revealed newsletters and reservation confirmations from a hotel. It appeared he had visited every Wednesday and Friday. He always said he would be late due to drinking parties with juniors on Wednesdays and with bosses or clients on Fridays. But now I knew the real reason behind it. I knew the name of the hotel, so if I followed him, I thought I would be able to get photographic evidence. However, I was an amateur and wanted to avoid getting caught. I had to devise a plan to obtain solid evidence through surveillance. Julia planned to visit in 4 days, but by then, I was determined to investigate Phil's infidelity and monitor Julia's behavior. Phil misunderstood Julia as the unfortunate heroine, but that was all just a misunderstanding. She was just a cheater, scheming to stay until she could secure getting married. So, I had to prepare for any future events by gathering as much advantageous information as possible. With these thoughts, I continued to gather information on social media. I clicked on a profile that was likely Julia's in the connections with friends section. The photos were heavily edited, changing the shape of her face and the size of her eyes, but it was undoubtedly Julia. After examining the photos and posts uploaded on Julia's page, I came across something I didn't want to be true. I can't believe this. The images Julia uploaded were hints to her relationship, and a specific item belonging to a man caught my eyes. Although his face wasn't clear, the item reminded me of the husband of a close friend from high school. I was close enough to them to have given a speech at their wedding. I remembered his unique taste from my visits to their house when I was still single. For example, a keychain of a shark's bone he shared with his wife, or wallets and ties with unique designs that reflected his preferences. Anyone who knew him could identify him from these items in the photos. I was not sure if my best friend from high school was aware of this situation, but she likely didn't know. Feeling doubtful yet believing my friend is likely unaware, I decide to share just the SNS information with her, leaving it to her discretion whether to confront his infidelity or not. There was also someone else I needed to talk to. It's been a while, Mother. I heard that you'll be staying with us from the day after tomorrow. Phil mentioned it. However, I have something to discuss with you before that. What a coincidence. I was also planning to let you know something before coming over the day after tomorrow. It seemed my mother-in-law also had something she wanted to share with me. In that case, it's time to reveal everything. I'll be frank. I'm considering getting a divorce due to Phil's affair. I'm still here, but once I finish organizing my belongings, I plan to leave. I suspected as much. Phil suddenly started to be kind to me, which was unusual. Do you have evidence? It was understandable that my mother-in-law wanted to see evidence. If her son was committing adultery and that was the reason for the breakup, naturally, she would want to see the evidence. Please look at this. I found it on the computer we share. The exchange of emails and photos prove everything. I see. Is this all the evidence you have? While flipping through the printed emails, my mother-in-law asked a heavy question. Her gaze was suffocating. This is all I have for now. When I confront Phil, I want to have solid evidence, but it's not perfect yet. Well, considering his character, excuses and lies are expected. Please use this and hire a detective. She slowly took something out of her bag, revealing a bank book and a card. What are these funds? It's part of my husband's assets. He had an affair in the past, so I despise infidelity and affairs. Isn't this the perfect opportunity to teach him a lesson? While saying this, my mother-in-law smirked secretly. I had hardly spoken to her before and found her a bit intimidating, but I never expected her to be this supportive. Use these funds to make him take full responsibility. I highly appreciate that a capable woman like you married my irresponsible son, so don't hesitate to rely on it. With my mother-in-law's support, I hired a detective specializing in tracking infidelity and obtained solid evidence. Deciding when to confront Phil with it required carefully thinking things through. 2 weeks after my mother-in-law and Julia started living with us, I was ready to begin my new life. During a holiday, a letter addressed to Julia was forwarded to our house, triggering an unexpected revelation. What? I can't pay $30,000 at once. Weren't you planning on getting married soon? What happened? It's from his wife, demanding compensation. Phil immediately stood up, snatched the document from Julia, and exclaimed, "What's this? A woman's name as the sender? It must be fake, slander or harassment." Somehow, Phil seemed to believe Julia was completely innocent. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law seemed utterly unaware of the situation. The beloved boyfriend Julia mentioned before is my best friend's husband. You were pregnant, and if the baby was born, he was going to leave his wife and marry you, right? Were you really planning to do that? Was that all a lie? I can't believe it. Trying to destroy someone else's family. While saying this, Julia started to tearfully insist on her innocence. But the relationship with his wife was already strained, and they were on the brink of divorce. He said he wanted to raise our child together, that he wanted our baby. Their relationship was already over, right? So it's not adultery or an affair, and there's no reason for compensation. Look, this must be some kind of prank. Julia has always been the target of jealousy and envy. Feeling it was time to speak up, I broached the subject with Phil. So, you're saying infidelity and affairs are not a problem? Yeah, it's part of being a man, and constantly dealing with compensation and lawyers seems excessive. Just overlook it. I spread the photos taken by the detective across the table. The person in these images is unmistakably you, Phil, right? According to the research, you were having an affair with a woman called Sarah, your business partner. Please stop belittling people. Disregarding my rage, Phil still managed a light laugh. I've said it before, but this is a man's pride. If you can't understand this, social life will be difficult. That's enough. My intention to divorce is firm, and the responsibility lies with you, Phil. Of course, I'll be demanding compensation as well. Wait a minute, that's unacceptable, right? What's this about compensation? Calm down a bit. While this was happening, my mother-in-law raised her voice in anger. I've been listening to all this nonsense all this time, and there's no saving Phil or Julia. I never thought my own children would have such a rotten personality. I'm disappointed. Wait, I don't have that kind of money. Mom, please pay for it. Think of it as the college tuition I never used. No matter what excuse you have, I won't be convinced, so just give up. As my mother-in-law and Julia were arguing, Phil turned to me, seeking clarification. You're not seriously considering divorce and compensation, right? You still love me, don't you? What are you talking about? You cheated on me, made unilateral decisions, and who was it that threatened divorce if I didn't accept living with your mother and Julia? All of a sudden, Phil started to cry hearing my response. My meeting with Sarah was fate, true love. What we had was a completely different kind of love. You understand, right? You'll support our love, won't you? I wasn't able to understand you from the start, and I have no intention to do now either. I've finished packing, so I'm leaving this place. Are you really going to leave? What am I supposed to do? I looked down at Phil, who was pitifully pleading at my feet, and declared my final decision. I don't care. You'll be getting the divorce papers and documents about the compensation, so deal with them. Thanks to involving a lawyer, our divorce proceeded smoothly. An agreement was reached to ensure the payment of compensation. Although my mother-in-law lost her husband, she was healthy both mentally and physically and has started living alone for the first time in her life. She seemed to be leading a fulfilling life with her hobbies and training every day. As for Julia, it seems her affair and pregnancy became widely known. People's gossip was inevitable, and eventually it became a well-known fact. She was fired from her temporary job, and with the rumors about her affair spreading, it became difficult for her to find employment anywhere else. Moreover, Julia's affair partner ultimately chose to make up with his wife, my close friend, leaving Julia completely abandoned. One day, Julia, driven by anger, confronted me. You revealed his and my secret to his wife, didn't you? Was your promise to wholeheartedly celebrate our happiness a lie? Julia accused me furiously. I responded calmly. I never uttered a word about celebrating. Infidelity is unacceptable under any circumstances. Moreover, since she is my close friend, I could not stand by and watch her suffer and fall into misfortune. But your interference was unnecessary. Completely unnecessary. Julia raised her voice. I lost my job, can't find a new one, and even lost the person I loved the most. I blame you for all of this. During our confrontation in a bustling supermarket, Julia attempted to physically confront me, but fortunately, a young security guard intervened promptly, preventing the situation from escalating any further. Both Phil and Julia tried to seek help from their mother, but she coldly rejected all requests. Meanwhile, I heard Phil, due to his dishonest actions, was abandoned by his lover and fell into a gambling addiction. As a result, he was late in paying the compensation, so I decided to request his employer to garnish his wages. The rumor of the divorce caused by the compensation issue spread like wildfire throughout Phil's workplace, becoming a serious issue that could not be overlooked. Despite being a top sales performer respected by many colleagues, his personal actions were scrutinized, leading to his transfer to a department often referred to as the sideline room, where employees merely bide their time without meaningful work. After the divorce, I embraced my newfound freedom, fully enjoying my personal time. Although I once deeply desired to have children and build a happy family with Phil, that now seemed like a distant memory, and I decided to prioritize my financial independence. Furthermore, in my new partner, whom I met through work, I have found a serious and supportive relationship that brings a new sense of fulfillment to my life. He is a mid-career male nurse, skilled at empathizing with others, and our conversations always provide comfort and reassurance, whether or not we decide to have children. He is a trustworthy and wonderful person who accepts me entirely, allowing us to build our future together. I am determined to forge my path in life, focusing on pursuing my happiness. If you won't listen to me, I'm not above considering divorce. With such a self-centered statement from my husband, I've come to feel that I no longer want to be involved with him. I've decided to accept the option of divorce that he proposed. He looked at me contentedly, unaware of what the future holds. My name is Amy. I'm 35 years old, married for 5 years, and living with my husband. We've been wanting children but haven't been blessed with any. We considered fertility treatments, but ultimately decided to wait for it to happen naturally due to my husband's views. Even if we can't have children, living our lives together is a life in itself, he said, which lightened my heart a bit. After we got married, both of my husband's parents passed away one after the other, so we didn't have time to focus on treatment. Truth be told, my husband has always been bossy. We were originally a boss and a subordinate at work. In front of relatives, he calls me a foolish wife and scolds me harshly for any mistakes. This relationship has continued even after we became husband and wife. Saying this might make my husband seem like a bad person, but he has his kind moments too. When he was my superior, he would give me precise advice and guidance during work failures or difficulties, and he has thanked me for my efforts. One particularly memorable moment was when he encouraged me after I lost my beloved grandfather, which deepened our relationship and eventually led to our marriage. After marriage, I quit my job to become a housewife. Amy, I'm home. Welcome back. You must be tired. My husband comes home after 9 p.m. His responsibilities as a manager are heavy, and he works late almost every day. You've had a tough day again. Thank you for your hard work, I would say as I tidy up his clothes and socks. He sinks into the sofa, too tired to reply, and remains quiet. This has become his daily routine. I start preparing dinner so he can eat as soon as possible. Once the meal and a fork are ready, he silently begins to eat. After finishing his meal in about 10 minutes, he heads to the bath. I prepare a bath towel and underwear for him and clean up after the meal. Then, my husband goes straight to the bedroom after his bath. He's always been a man of few words, but since his promotion, he seems more exhausted, and our conversations have become almost non-existent. Yet, I deeply trust and love him because he was there for me when I was at my lowest. I lost my father in middle school and my mother right after entering high school. My grandfather took me in and raised me like his own daughter. I loved my kind and warm grandfather with all my heart. When I became a working adult, I strongly wished to repay my grandfather for his kindness by taking him on trips and enjoying delicious meals together. The days I spent with my grandfather were incredibly happy, and I always wished for his health. However, 3 years into my career, my grandfather passed away from lung cancer, leaving me completely alone. Though I knew we would have to part ways someday, I never expected it to be so soon. I wanted to do more for my grandfather and spend more time with him. Overwhelmed by grief, I spent many nights crying. It was then that my boss at the time, who is now my husband, noticed my distress and supported me. My husband listened to me and offered comforting words, saying, "That must have been tough. You have done well." I'm truly grateful that he was my superior. Even though he's usually strict, he was particularly warm and encouraging at that moment. I'm convinced from the bottom of my heart that my husband truly has a warm heart. This fact is clear to me. That's why I sincerely wish to continue supporting my husband going forward. That's how I've been feeling lately. But then, something happened one afternoon on a day off. Our home phone rang. "Hello, yes. Hey, it's your brother-in-law." The caller was my husband's brother. Oh, it's been a while. What's up? Actually, I need to talk to my brother. Is he there? Yes, just a moment. I relayed the message to my husband, who was relaxing in the living room. There's a call for you. Hello, hey, how are you? What's up? Unusually, my husband started smiling as soon as he began talking to his brother. He always shows special affection towards his brother, who is 15 years younger than him, got married to a beautiful woman 2 years ago and seems to be living a happy life. But what could have happened? Really? Is that so? Are you okay? My husband's tone suddenly became serious. I was curious about what was going on. Understood. If you're ever in trouble, don't hesitate to say something. You know, I'm your brother. With that, my husband ended the call. What happened? Is everything okay? It seems like my brother lost his job. What? He was fired. I was shocked. I hadn't expected this. Yes, I heard the company's situation wasn't great, but to be fired. My husband sat down, disappointed. I couldn't hide my own shock. My brother-in-law is very different from my husband. He's gentle and calm, always humble. He treats me like his real sister, and even when my husband belittles me in front of relatives, he'd say, "Brother, don't say things like that. It will make Amy sad," and apologize to me for my husband's rudeness. His wife is also wonderful, and I have a very positive impression of them as a couple. That he was fired. I wondered how we could possibly support my brother-in-law and his wife. I was filled with a desire to help and support them. Hey, is there anything I can do? Then, my husband looked at me coldly. What can you do? Well, I was thinking if there's anything we can do to help cheer up your brother a bit. My husband sighed deeply at my suggestion. You're really useless, aren't you? You might not understand because you lack social experience, but this is their toughest time. Saying thoughtlessly that we should help without understanding the situation is something I'd prefer outsiders to refrain from. His overly aggressive stance made me reflexively argue back. It seems my words intended as kindness angered him. Outsider? Aren't I part of the family too? I retorted to my husband. Family? You are my wife, but you have no relation to my brother. Irrelevant. An outsider. His words pierced my heart deeply. It was the first time my husband had been so aggressive. The fact that his brother had lost his job must have been a huge shock to him. However, I thought there was no need for him to speak like that. Just don't do anything unnecessary, he said before leaving the house. After that, my husband became even stricter towards me. What is this? You should learn from my brother's wife. What have you been doing at home today? Well, at home, my brother's wife manages to keep everything in order and perfectly handles the household chores. I had never seen my husband be so unreasonable before. What on earth happened? Can you just calm down a bit? What has gotten into you? I finally voiced my opinion to my husband. Quiet. Everything has become a mess because of you. My husband uttered such nonsensical things. It was incomprehensible. Eventually, we stopped having conversations or even exchanging glances, and the distance between us as a couple grew wider. Gradually, I began to doubt our relationship. On one such day, my husband was packing in the morning. Like doing a major cleaning, he sorted necessary from unnecessary items, and garbage bags piled up. I wondered what he was doing. However, our relationship had recently become so strained that I didn't have the energy to speak to him, so I didn't say anything about his actions. Unusually, my husband spoke to me. Hey, what are you doing? Get ready to. What? Ready for what? We're moving. We're giving this house to my brother and his wife. What are you talking about? According to my husband, we were to give our house, where we lived, to his brother and his wife, who were struggling after he lost his job. What? What do you mean? Don't do something so arbitrary. Shut up. Don't defy me, my husband shouted at me. However, I wasn't fazed. Didn't you want to do something for my brother too? That's completely different, isn't it? If we're giving away this house, where are we supposed to live? I asked my husband this question amidst my confusion. He replied nonchalantly, we can think about that later. What's important now is that my brother is facing a severe hardship. He needs the support of his brother right now. My husband was proceeding with things in a very self-centered manner, as if his decision was absolute. However, I knew that my brother-in-law was not the kind of person to kick us out and live in this house boldly. They are not like that. Why would my husband make such a decision? As I harbored this question, my husband said something unexpected to me. If you keep resisting, you're no longer needed in this house. My husband coldly stated. The next day, while I was irritably cleaning my husband's room, I found a completed divorce application. I had never imagined that my husband was trying to end our marriage. I was completely stunned by this unexpected action from my husband. But somewhere in my heart, I came to understand that this situation might be a meaningful turning point for us as a couple. I felt that there was no prospect of our relationship recovering if I stayed with my husband any longer. Therefore, I picked up the divorce application that I had dropped to the floor in shock and silently signed it. My husband would never dream that I would actually file for divorce. Imagining this unexpected turn of events, I somewhat smirked to myself. After signing that night, I finally resolved to confront my husband. "Listen, do you remember that this house isn't your property?" I asked him, and he responded with a puzzled, "Huh? This house is where I lived with my grandfather, and the land was inherited from him, who has passed away. Did you forget that I inherited it?" My words left my husband visibly surprised. "Considering this house is in my name, how do you plan to transfer it to your brother? I'd like to know." I pressed on with my questions. "Well, that..." My husband began to falter. "Did you forget that fact? You started living in my house before we were married because you thought paying rent was a waste. I've been paying the property taxes on this house and land every year. You've never once contributed, have you? And yet, you decide to give it away without consulting me." I challenged him. "No, that's because..." He stumbled over his words. "Enough. Once this application is submitted, the divorce will be official. Then, we'll truly be strangers," I declared calmly, presenting the divorce application in front of him. "Wait, let's talk this over calmly," he said hastily. "Calm down? That's my line. I'm appalled that you'd prepare a divorce application so easily. Your selfishness is astonishing." I unleashed all the grievances I had been holding back. I had once loved my husband wholeheartedly and believed he loved me too. But perhaps that was my misunderstanding. I never expected our marriage could end so easily. "Amy, wait, you're misunderstanding something. Let's talk this through properly." "Talk about what exactly?" "It was you who proposed divorce, wasn't it? I no longer have any love left for you." Declaring so, I carefully placed the divorce application in an envelope. I planned to submit it to the city hall first thing in the morning, using the weekend. My husband collapsed to the floor in dismay. "I never imagined it would come to this," he murmured in a dazed voice. Without any sympathy for him, I firmly stated, "This is my house. Leave quickly. Once the divorce application is submitted, we will be strangers. It's impossible for strangers to live under the same roof." My husband continued to resist until the moment he left the house, but my resolve was firm. He was now a stranger. There was no reason for sympathy. Even as my husband pleaded with tears, my heart was unmoved. Eventually, he left the house as if resigning himself. Our divorce became quickly known at his workplace. He began to receive cold looks, and various rumors sparked by the divorce spread, seemingly making him lose his place at work. Who spread such rumors? I merely answered questions from his colleagues and subordinates, without taking any further actions. Then, one day, half a year after the divorce, on my way back from visiting a real estate agency, I unexpectedly encountered an unwelcome person. It was my former husband, now to be referred to as my ex-husband. It appeared as if he had been waiting for me to come out of the real estate agency. His behavior gave me an eerie feeling. Because he persistently followed me, I couldn't ignore him, and I ultimately chose to speak with him. "Enough already. If you have something to say it quickly." I pressed him for an answer. "Amy, actually, I've been resenting you for a long time." My husband glared at me and suddenly said this. "What?" I was baffled by his sudden statement. As he explained, "It turned out that my husband blamed me for his brother's job loss." "How is that my fault?" I asked him. "Ever since we got married, misfortunes have piled up." That's what he said. Indeed, since our marriage, his parents had passed away, and he had also injured himself, among other misfortunes. However, his father had been hospitalized before our marriage, and his mother had always been frail. Moreover, his injury was due to him falling while drunk, breaking his wrist, which was entirely his own fault. Despite this, he seemed to believe I was the cause of his misfortune. Learning that my husband blamed all his bad luck on me left me utterly astounded. "So, you hated me because you thought I was the cause of your misfortune? I forgave you, thinking you were just clumsy, but you actually just resented me." I was disappointed with his attitude. He always blamed others, a truly self-centered person. Without any basis, he just blamed others. I couldn't understand how he managed to hold a managerial position at work. I was worried if his subordinates were also unfairly blamed for unreasonable reasons. When had the superior I once trusted changed into such a person? And I felt a bit pitiful for having married such a person. But since divorcing you, bad luck has indeed continued. What kind of bad luck specifically? When I asked, he rolled up his sleeve to show me. His skin was scarred from burns. Actually, there was a fire in the apartment I lived in 3 months ago. Not only that, I also lost my wallet, and I've been making mistakes at work. Moreover, things haven't been going well with my brother recently, and we haven't been in contact. In other words, his misfortune continued even after our divorce. It's no surprise. Honestly, even hearing about his troubles, I couldn't muster any sympathy for his misfortune, because all of it was a result of his own actions. It had nothing to do with me. Please, Amy, I want you to come back. I'm nothing without you. Remember? We were together as a couple, and when you were working as a salaryman, I supported you in many ways, right? And when your grandfather passed away, I was there to support you a lot, he said, trying to guilt trip me. The misfortune you're facing is the result of your own actions, right? Why don't you reflect on yourself? You should really do something about your bad habit of always blaming others, I told him and walked away. Amy, wait, Amy, he called out, trying to stop me, but I pretended not to know him and disappeared into the crowd. About a week later, I received a call from the person who used to be my brother-in-law. Amy, I guess I can't call you sister anymore. Actually, I have something to talk about regarding my brother. According to my brother-in-law, the decision to give our house to his brother was made unilaterally by my husband. My brother-in-law and his wife knew nothing about the plan. My brother has always had a tendency to show off, and I've been worried about his personality for a long time. The way he treated you, Amy, was terrible, and it was painful to watch as his brother. He said, he truly was a kind-hearted person. I wonder why there's such a difference in personality between the brothers. I don't know if it's my place to say this, but I feel you made the right decision by divorcing. I hope you find happiness, Amy. Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. Later, I heard that my former brother-in-law fortunately found a job quickly and seemed to be managing to make ends meet. I was truly relieved. I've decided to keep some distance from my brother. It seems my brother-in-law had his own thoughts. He mentioned gradually reducing interactions with his brother, who was my ex-husband. This was why my ex-husband had lost contact with his younger brother. After the divorce, being distanced by his closest brother, my ex-husband found himself in a state of loneliness. I hope one day he can understand the consequences of his actions. Before that, I have to completely disappear from my ex-husband's life. On the day I encountered my ex-husband, I had just signed a contract with a real estate agent to rent out the house I inherited from my grandfather. The house was too large for me to live in alone. However, I couldn't bear to part with the house filled with memories of my grandfather. I hoped to let someone who wanted to live there use the house. I changed my phone number and address, cutting off all ties with my ex-husband. Life still holds many possibilities for me. After all, I am only 35 years old. My name is Lindsay. I'm a 29-year-old company employee, and this year means I'm getting older still. I met Jake, a year older than me, through friends, and we decided to marry 6 months after we started dating. Jake, who made a name for himself in tennis during his student days, is an active person who continues to play tennis even now. As I was in the tennis club during my student days, we immediately found common ground together. Once we started dating, we would often play tennis together on the weekends. One day, after our date, Jake proposed to me and we decided to get married. It's been almost 3 years since we got married. We don't have children, but we bought an apartment after getting married and have been living together ever since. Both of us work, and while we aren't struggling financially, we can't say that we're wealthy either. We're living a happy life. However, something happened between us that shattered my peaceful days. One day, Jake suddenly asked me to come to his parents' house. Surprised, I hurried there to find Jake, his parents, and an unknown woman waiting for me. As I struggled to understand the situation, Jake suddenly knelt down and said, "Lindsay, I'm truly sorry. The truth is, I've been involved with this woman here, Olivia. Last week, we found out that Olivia is pregnant. I feel responsible for her and the baby. So I think it's better that we separate. I'm sorry, but I want a divorce." Jake shocked me with this revelation. Exposed to his infidelity, the pregnancy, and faced with his demands for divorce, I was stunned. That was when my mother-in-law spoke to me. "Lindsay, please forgive Jake. Yes, he cheated, but the problem lies with you too. You and Jake weren't really a good match from the beginning. So, I'm sorry, but please forget about him. And my father-in-law added, Olivia's father is an executive at a major company. A man in a totally different position from someone like your poor father. I think you know who's more suitable for our son. I couldn't believe it. Jake's father belittled not only me, but also my father too. Normally, parents would put the blame on their son for cheating, but Jake's parents didn't seem to think that way. Instead, they seemed to think it was natural for us to divorce, and that their son had done nothing wrong. I took the divorce papers and said, I understand what you all want to say. Being with people who have such warped thoughts might affect me too. I'm shocked at how you make it seem like I'm the villain despite Jake's infidelity. Don't worry, I'll file these divorce papers myself. I'll leave the rest to a lawyer. And with that, I quickly left the scene. As I left, my father-in-law mockingly said, a poor person hiring a lawyer? What a waste of time and money, when she doesn't even have any. She shouldn't bite off more than she can chew. Ha ha ha. Ignoring him, I left his parents' house and immediately went to City Hall to file the divorce papers. At least I was able to end my marriage with Jake. The next day, surprisingly, Jake and Olivia came to my apartment. Seeing me, Jake said, Oh, you're still here? You haven't even packed your things. You're taking your time, aren't you? Hearing this, Olivia also looked at me curiously. I was furious at Jake's words. What are you talking about? You're the one who should be taking it slow. This is my house, so you should be the one to leave. The movers are coming soon to take all your belongings to your parents' house. If there's anything you don't want them to touch, you should take it now, I retorted. Hearing this, Jake suddenly panicked. What? This is my house. The ownership should be in my name, he exclaimed. I was dumbfounded. After all, this apartment was bought in my name. I had already told Jake about this, and about my family's background before we got married. But it seems that Jake is the type to conveniently forget things that don't suit him. Perhaps this carefree nature is why he was easily swayed by Olivia. I showed the deed to the apartment and my name was clearly written on it. Jake's face quickly changed upon seeing it. Meanwhile, Olivia's face began to cloud over with anger. Jake, what is this all about? This is completely different from what you told me before. Were you deceiving me? Olivia began to confront him. This is strange. What's happening? Jake responded in confusion. That's not an answer. Explain yourself. Olivia pressed on. First, this is my house, so please take your argument outside. And just so you know, Jake has various debts. So if you're planning to marry him, be prepared for that burden. I calmly stated the facts to Olivia. Hearing this, Olivia seemed about to say something, but I didn't care and kicked both of them out of the room, slamming the door behind them. After a while, I could hear them arguing outside the door, but it eventually quieted down. About an hour later, the movers finally arrived and took all of Jake's belongings to his parents' house. The room was now clean, and I was relaxing in the newly organized space. But it was short-lived. Suddenly, the intercom rang repeatedly. I cautiously opened the door with the chain lock still on, and my mother-in-law was standing there. Hello, is there something you need? Lindsay, why did you keep such an important thing a secret? What are you talking about? I can't believe it, but Jake just told me that this apartment is in your name and that your parents are the owners of that famous restaurant chain. It seemed Jake finally remembered my family's circumstances. What about it? If I had known, I would never have let this divorce happen. A daughter from such a wealthy family. We would love to have you back in our family. Lindsay, please, reconsider and start over with Jake. I was shocked and at a loss for words at her outrageous request. I couldn't possibly agree to what she was asking. You really have a terrible way of thinking about things. Am I not a human being? Are you only interested in money? I'm sorry, but I don't want anything more to do with you. There's nothing more to talk about, so please leave, I said and attempted to close the door. But my mother-in-law, infuriated by my attitude, raised her voice in anger. Don't be so arrogant. I'm giving you my permission to reconcile your differences. Fix things with him right now. I won't leave this spot until you agree to get back together. Open this door immediately. She said this, pounding on the door repeatedly. I decided that I couldn't handle this alone and called the police. They came and took my mother-in-law away. Even as the officers were taking her, she was shouting something loudly, but I no longer cared to listen to her words. There was a reason why my in-laws were unaware of my family's business background. My father, coming from a poor background since childhood, continued to live modestly, even after becoming a company president. He never considered buying branded clothes. He always took great care of his belongings and used them for a long time. Hence, at our wedding, he wore a suit he had bought decades ago. Seeing this, my in-laws assumed that my father was not financially well off and misunderstood his restaurant chain as a small, privately owned business. As a result, they never delved deeper into my father's business. Time went by without them understanding the true circumstances of my family. Days after managing to send my mother-in-law home, Jake tried to persuade me to reconcile our differences. His persistence was incredibly exhausting. It was surprising how insistent he was, despite the fact that he was the one who proposed the divorce. He seems to have a talent for quickly forgetting inconvenient truths. I opened the door, keeping the chain lock on, and Jake, upon seeing me, began to speak with teary eyes. Lindsay, please, let's give it another try. Everything is my fault. I'm truly sorry. I still love you. Let's be together again. He then explained a sudden turn of events. Olivia had apparently approached Jake aiming to get his house, pretending to be pregnant to sway him. However, once she learned about Jake's considerable debts, she gave up and fled, and now Jake was coming to me to seek reconciliation. Huh? What are you saying? I don't know anything about that. How can you say that? After you cheated and brought up divorce, now that she's left you, you want to get back together? There's no limit to your audacity. I have no intention of getting back together with you. Don't ever come here again. I refused Jake right there and then. Surprisingly, he quietly left. However, this was not to be their last attempt. Days later, Jake's entire family unexpectedly showed up at my workplace. They were shouting, "Bring out Lindsay. Get that woman out here. We know she's here," causing chaos in the office and leading to the security guards being called. I stood there, dumbfounded by the situation. But they wouldn't have things their way any longer. I worked at the headquarters of my father's company, and that day, my father was also in the office. All of my colleagues also supported me. "Hey, what are you doing? This is my company. Don't just barge in and make a scene. I know everything you did to demean my daughter. Don't ever come near her again, and never set foot in this company again." My usually calm father shouted furiously at my ex-in-laws. Everyone, including the employees and Jake's family, must have been surprised at the anger of my father, who usually only shows his gentle and calm side. Sorry. We're really sorry. Jake's family desperately apologized. My father's stern words had immediately quieted them down. As they were being escorted out by security, my father shouted in a strong voice, "Don't you ever come here again, and never do something like this again. I won't allow it. You understand?" Hearing this, I couldn't stop myself from crying. I felt a deep sense of gratitude that my father had gotten so angry for my sake. Later, through the company's legal advisor, I decided to seek damages from Jake's family. I sought damages for the divorce due to Jake's infidelity, for his persistent attempts at reconciliation after the divorce, and for the disturbance at my workplace. The total amount was substantial, and I eventually received payment from them. I also made them sign a written agreement promising never to come before me again. Jake's family's state of affairs rapidly declined thereafter. Chased by the money owed to me and Jake's existing debts, they ended up selling their home and moving far away. In town, the story spread that Jake had committed adultery, divorced his wife, and after being abandoned by his mistress, attempted to reconcile. Facing such embarrassment, they could no longer stay in this town. While I felt a bit of sympathy for them, I also knew that everything was a consequence of their actions, so it was clearly deserved. Jake's family never appeared before me again. Finally, I was able to resume my peaceful days. However, my father had harsh words for me as well regarding what had happened. He blamed me for not recognizing before the marriage that Jake was a person who would commit adultery and accrue debts. Certainly, while Jake was at fault, my lack of insight was also partly to blame. Unable to argue with my father, I felt disappointed and disillusioned with marriage. I felt that I needed to give my heart a break. However, about a year later, I decided to marry my colleague, Matt. Matt was sincere and earnest in his work, trusted by everyone. I was initially attracted by his personality, but as we started dating, I was also drawn to his lifestyle. His life was surprisingly simple. He never indulged in branded items, used everyday things for a long time, but generously spent money and spoiled me on dates. His behavior was very similar to my father's. My father, who usually saves money, would splurge on family trips, bringing us joy. I deeply loved and respected my father. Realizing Matt's actions were similar to my father's, I felt that I could be happy with him in the future. Therefore, I decided to marry Matt. I was worried about being scolded by my father for remarrying within a year of my divorce, but his reaction was surprisingly positive, probably because he had heard of Matt's reputation at work and knew of his character. There was nothing bad said about Matt, and from my father's perspective as the company president, Matt seemed to be performing exceptionally well. I feel confident that Matt will take good care of you, Lindsay, my father told me happily. Matt and I were happily married. Not long after our marriage, we discovered that I was with a child. The happiest person to hear this news was undoubtedly my father. I was so glad to see my father happy. Reflecting on my time with Jake, where we didn't have children even after 3 years of marriage, it seemed like a stroke of luck. Matt and I plan to take over the company in the future. We are currently learning the basics of management from my father. Although there are many challenges, we accept that they are our responsibility as successors, and we are working hard together. We believe that we will need even more effort for the sake of our upcoming child, despite all that's happened. I am now very happy. Together with my family, we intend to firmly support this company in the future.